Hey guys, it's RBB here with more information in Photoshop. Today we're going to discuss RR, Rolls Royce. Nope, we're going to talk about Rasters and Resolution. Not nearly as bougie. Okay, it's important to understand the programs you're working in so you choose the right type of program. And Photoshop, which we've been talking about for a while, is a raster-based program. R-A-S-T-E-R-S, rasters. And what a raster image is, it is a pixel-based image and it is resolution dependent. So Photoshop works, as I said, with pixels. So it is a raster image, okay, as opposed to a vector image, which works in math, and we're going to talk about that another time. So Photoshop, raster image, works on pixels. Okay, there you go. You with me so far? We're going to do this in little chunks. Some of these chunks are going to be harder to swallow. Our screens are measured in pixels. So your phone, your watch, your television, your movie screen, anything that projects light and works on pixels is measured in pixels horizontally and then vertically. So standard widescreen television measures 1,920 pixels by 1,080, 1920 by 1080. You've probably heard that phrase. 1920 by 1080 is standard widescreen. That's going to be your resolution for, YouTube or your television or watching your phone sideways. Any widescreen is going to probably default to 1920 by 1080, also called 2K. That is high definition. If you want it to be ultra high definition and get into something like 4K, 6K, 8K, okay, those are still 1,000, 4,000, 8,000, 6,000, okay, and it's the number still of pixels across the bottom of the screen and up and down the screen. Now you may say, why is it called 2K and not 1920 by 1080K or something like that? The only thing I can figure, and we're going to nerd out here for a second, so you can just hold your ears and hum if you don't want to hear this, but if you remember back to high school, the Pythagorean theorem, you thought you were never going to use it, but you are. Artists, we use math a lot. And if you use the Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which is the diagonal of your screen, it comes out to 1920 by 1080. C would come out to, C would be 2200, which would round down to 2000. Same thing with 4K. If you did the math and you had millions and blah, 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 and you did the square root and all that good stuff, you wind up with the hypotenuse of 4405, which again would just round down to 4K. So I guess somebody along the line said, let's measure diagonally. That is actually how your televisions are measured. If you buy a 36-inch television and it's like, that is neither 36 inches up or down, it's diagonal. So yeah, that's all I can figure is how they decided that it was 2K, 4K, was using the Pythagorean theorem. So thank your math teacher in high school. Send her some flowers. You actually will use that. All right. You can unplug your ears and listen now. What does that mean to me? Nothing. Don't worry about it. You don't have to know that. You can use that for trivia fun at parties. But 2K is standard widescreen, 1920 by 1080. Probably all you're going to need to remember, unless you're printing out something larger or doing work for a commercial or television or motion pictures or games or something, in which case you would need a higher resolution. Okay, just sketch your brain, file that away. Let's just start with Photoshop. All right, so when I'm creating a new document in Photoshop, when I go up to File and New, or Control N, and it brings up my dialog box for my new document. I know you guys hate when I say piece of paper. I have some choices, some presets, and notice that this time it popped up a little differently than sometimes you've seen before with all the pictures of presets. It's all the same thing. It's just a different format. So if I say US paper, that is going to be 8.5. It's a letter size. It's going to be 8.5 inches by 11 inches. And I see the next one down as resolution is 72 pixels per inch. We're going to come back to that in a second. How big is 8.5 inches by 11 inches in terms of screen space and pixels? So I can change my measurement over here to pixels, and I see, oh, that's a nice small 612 by 792 at 72 pixels per inch. Okay, so let's go back to inches for a second. So I know that my final thing, I want to print it out, and I want it to be 8.5 by 11. You know, on your printer, your regular home printer, you can generally set it to low resolution or high resolution. Sometimes it's called draft or photo, some sort of setting, and there's probably two, a low, fast, and a high quality one. They generally are 72 or 300. Those are sort of standard resolutions of low resolution and high resolution. So if I am sending this to somebody and I'm just going to send a JPEG, a nice small file, I want it to open quickly, I could leave it at this really small 600 and something pixels by 700 and something pixels. But if this was a photo, a portrait, a beautiful digital painting that I was going to print out, I would want to make it a higher resolution, which is 300. And if I do 300 pixels per inch, high resolution, did that change our pixel size? It did. We went from 600 and something to 2550 by 3300. Okay, now notice that nothing here changes. If I said okay, it's going to give me still an 8.5 by 11 document. Okay, but the number of pixels, the resolution of that document is wildly different. So you want to think about what is your final outcome. If you're not printing it and you want it to be fast and easy and quick, like macaroni and cheese, then you can just leave it at 72 pixels per inch. Okay. Whoops, not 72. You know what I mean. Ignore that. Okay, 8.5 by 11. 8.5 by 11. Okay. And if we do that by pixels, we're back to our little 612 by 792. So you want to know what is your final outcome. And generally, hopefully you do that when you start. If we're doing something that's going to be printed out, don't forget to change your color mode, which is something we'll talk about another time, to CMYK. CMYK is the color space of ink, of printing. RGB is our color space for our screens. Okay, so if we want to keep this nice and small, 8.5 by 11, 72 pixels per inch is nice and small. So if we say okay, it may show us, see, it's going to show us 8.5 by 11. It's exactly the same as this one over here. I'm actually clicking this file. This is a much larger file, okay, than this one here. Still 8.5 by 11, but more resolution. That's still not really making sense. Look at it this way. If I made a 500 by 500 pixel document, okay, and my brush was set at 100 pixels, so I took my brush and I set it at 100 pixels and I made a mark. Okay, this is the size of 100 pixels as it looks on a 500 by 500 resolution document. Now, if I made another square document that was 2000 by 2000 pixels, and I took my same 100 pixel brush at 2000 by 2000, it looks way smaller. This is 100 pixels across, but my area here is 2000 by 2000. Okay, this is 100 pixels across at 500 by 500. Okay, so the size of my brush is going to be relative to the size of my document. Now, these two images appear to both be like 7 by 7 inches, right? Oh, this one's actually much bigger. But on my screen, it doesn't appear any different. And if I don't know what is my final outcome, do I want this to be quick and send it to somebody? Or do I want to print this out? I may work at a much higher resolution just to sound impressive, like, oh, I do all my artwork in 8K. I would be like, why? You know, are you doing some crazy motion picture? Goes back to that television. When most television is produced or is distributed in 2K, is 1920 by 1080. So when you're watching Netflix and you're watching YouTube and you're watching movies on TV, unless it specifies that it's in 4K, it's in 2K. So if you went out and you bought that 4K television, ooh la la, and you've got 4,000 pixels, the movie that's on your screen is only 2000, 1920 by 1080. So it's stretched out over the real estate on your screen, which is 4,000 pixels. And guess what? It's gonna look worse. So there's not a lot of content out there to consume regularly on say, your regular television at 4K. So at this point, unless you're a digital artist and you're working on, a motion picture or a game or, some poster that's going to be gigantic, there's no reason to work at 4K, 8K, etc. Okay? So if all of that is like, I still have no idea what you're talking about. If that's the case, then stick to probably 72 pixels per inch, okay? And it generally makes your document smaller. And if you're not going to print it out, it doesn't really, it's fine. It doesn't really matter. We can always zoom in and out on our screen. If you hit Control plus and Control minus, it doesn't matter how big or small it looks in Photoshop. It's still the same size. We're just zoomed in or out. So hopefully that makes sense. If you are printing, we do want a higher resolution. And you can, again, you got to do the math. Let's go back to this file in new. If I want to print out this 2000 by 2000 awesome artwork that I just made right here, okay, and I know that I want it to be 2000 pixels, 2000 by 2000, okay, at 72 pixels per inch. The size of my image is now 11.4 megabytes, okay? I haven't even done anything. It's just 11.4 megabytes. If I made this smaller, say 1000 by 1000, same proportions at 72 resolution, is now 2.86 megabytes. If I went down to say 500 by 500, okay, we're under a megabyte. So depending on your final need, go with, the size that's going to make it quick and easy. If I want to print this out, I got to kind of do the math. Now, I don't have to do the math, but let's say I want to do 300 pixels per inch. Okay, then I need to, if it's 8 by 10, if I'm going to print out a glossy 8 by 10 color glossy photos with circles and arrows and the paragraph on the back of each one, explaining what each one was to be used in evidence against you. What's that from? If you wanted it at 300 pixels per inch, you would multiply 300 times 8 and 300 times 10. So then your resolution would need to be 2400 by 3350, I think it is, okay? That would be 8 by 10 document. Let's go back to my inches again. Okay, 8 by 10. Okay, at 8 by 10 inches at 300 pixels per inch is 20 megabytes. Okay, and I haven't even done anything yet. If I look at the pixels, it's 2400 by 3000. Not sure if that's exact. Oh yeah, because I usually do 8.5 by 11. 2400 by 3000. That is a larger file, but I have more resolution. Okay, you have to sort of decide what's the end goal. So some troubleshooting might be if you're working on a less powerful computer and you find your brush lagging. I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. And you find your brush lagging when you draw. If you make a line like this and it's going da, 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 you're asking your computer to compute too much information for your laptop. And it is working. It's just taking a while to catch up. So A, get a new computer. Okay. Tell your husband, wife, mom, dad, whoever, I said it's okay. You can have a more powerful laptop. Go tell them. I'll wait. Okay. If that's not the problem, it may be that your resolution is just set too high. So if it's not that you have a clunky old brick of a computer, it could be your resolution is too high. I have had students do posters that were 18 by 24. And what they did was, or 1920, let's say I told them to do 1920 by 1080. I wanted them to do 1920 by 1080 pixels. Okay? But some people were like, oh, I'm just going to put in those numbers and not look at the measurements. And they had it in inches. Okay, so when they had it in inches and they did 1920 by 1080 inches, okay, that's 30 gigs. And most of the time their computers blew up. It would never open. It would crash constantly. And they're like, oh, no, what's wrong? You're a terrible teacher. this matters. Size matters. I don't care what they say. So go back to pixels, 1920 by 1080. Make sure you're in the right measurements, but those are some troubleshooting things. If your computer is lagging or your brush or your tools are taking a while to show up, that could be it. It could be too large. You can check the resolution. If you're not sure and you've already created it and you've drawn this awesome picture, I don't know what this is. This looks like one of those line art things where somebody gives you, a scribble and you have to turn it into something. This looks like a person wearing like some kind of, here's their eyeball. Okay, this is, I don't know, this is their hair. I don't know, whatever. And you want to see how big is this image. If you go up to image here at the top and you go to canvas size right here, the hotkey is Alt-Control-C, but you've heard me say before, more than 2 keys is not a hotkey, that's yoga. So my canvas size, I can check and see, oh, this is 8.5, this is 8 by 10 inches, and my document is 20 megabytes. All right. If you accidentally put this in as 1920 by 1080 inches, then it's going to say, holy moly, your canvas size is, ridiculously gigantic. All right. So I hope that kind of demystified rasters. Maybe it satisfied some of the nerdlings in the audience that are like, oh, I'll bet it is the hypotenuse. Yes, I do love square roots. For the rest of us, just remember that 2K is standard widescreen resolution, is 1920 by 1080. 4K is super high quality. It is 3840 by 2160. Okay, and unless you need that high resolution, don't do it. All right, well, I hope that sort of helped to explain rasters and resolution in a way that kind of made sense. I'm going to see if maybe I can do this in a 5-minute. Probably won't use words like hypotenuse in that one, but hopefully that's pretty clear. Great. Well, let me know in the comments if there's any confusion, if you'd like to see a shorter, I don't want to say dumbed down, but a more simplified version that doesn't use words like Pythagorean and Rolls Royce. All right, I hope that was helpful. I will see you guys in the next one. Please let me know if I can talk about any specific tool for you. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Be well.